So I think the key in that, Katya, is really the balance. And it's never going to be an either or. It's always going to have to be a both. And while we're seeing that growth within firms is slowing down quite a bit, there's still growth there. And there's always going to be people that are leaving. They're looking for different opportunities, that turnover and attrition. So firms have to really focus on how do we bring in the right people? And then once we have them here, how do we keep them there? The upskilling is a key part of that.
Okay.
But another key aspect of that is being able to help them see their future in the firm and being able to see where they can go, where they can grow, where they can develop. And we're starting to see some of those firms that are at least having plans for investing more in training, investing more in their employees in a very intentional way, spending more time in career development, spending more time in having those plans for their, where are they going to go that is not just for what the firm wants, but what the employee wants as well. Not everybody maybe wants to be a project manager. So how do you take those really skilled engineers and architects and what does their career path look like and how does that fit into the whole puzzle? So I think as we look at that upskilling piece of it, it's really key that that's not only a priority, we're also hearing from firms that we need to make sure they have the time for it. So when we're looking at project managers who are juggling so much already, they have so many things on their plate. How do we make time for them to improve their technical skills, improve their soft skills, think about future growth and leadership? And there's a lot that comes into that. If we're still expecting them to be very billable, highly utilized, there's a conflict there that firms really have to be thinking about. And that's going to help separate them when they're in that hiring to be able to be a more attractive opportunity for some of these candidates.
So therefore, giving them the tools to
Right.
succeed to do that.
And making sure that there's also time for them to learn those tools and figure out how to use them. If you think of when everybody started to use Copilot, the first question that everybody asks is, "This is great, but what do I do with it?"
Right.
I don't know what to ask. I don't know what to prompt. We're getting better at that now, but that type of training, it can't just be here's the tool, but helping those teams learn, how do I do this? How does this make me more efficient? How does this make me more effective? And also being cognizant that while we're trying to make sure that we are doing more with fewer people, we don't want to burn out the teams. We have to have that balance. We have to have the investment in their future so that they don't feel like they're just here to deliver as much as they can and they're working crazy hours. And, that's um, not as much of the culture in some of the younger generation that has been historically, specifically in this industry. And I think part of what you asked about too is in terms of capturing some of that senior leadership and their knowledge. And they have so much to offer in terms of their technical knowledge, their soft skills, their relationships with clients. And how do you capture that appropriately so that it they're being seen as the experts? They don't necessarily see themselves as that internally, but if you can help to say, "Hey, we'd love for you to do something to train some of our teams on this topic," then they can get behind that. If you're asking them to come up with like, "What could you train people on?" They're like, "That's not me. I don't want to be a part of that." But being very deliberate about that knowledge transfer is going to be really important because a lot of that institutional knowledge, as you said, is going to be walking out the door. And how do you capture that really before it's gone? I think, even now when there's a lot more turnover and there's a lot more transition between firms, that knowledge is moving from firm to firm. And people aren't starting out their career at one firm in engineering and staying there until they retire. So how do you plan for that and how do you capture some of that along the way is definitely a challenge that firms haven't quite solved for yet. And it's still something that, we're still trying to figure out, how do we capture some of that goodness and not lose it as people look for other opportunities, because that's the reality of what we're dealing with now.